I want to talk about something that we don't talk about often enough, and I want to invite both women and men to this conversation. Globally, 1 in 3 women will experience violence of some kind in her lifetime. 1 in 3. And this is not a women's issue, and it's not a political issue. It's a human rights issue. And men sometimes face abuse also. I've personally experienced abuse in places that were supposed to be safe. And almost every day as a coach, I speak with women who are getting out of abusive relationships and trying to recover. So this topic is deeply personal for me. Recent headlines have brought up a lot of emotion for me, as well as a deep desire for change. And change begins with ending our collective silence around abuse. So today I'd like to talk about what we can do, both women and men together, to create a safer world for everyone. Recent headlines may have stirred up some emotions for you. I know it has for me. And I want to first start by acknowledging victims of abuse, whether you're a man, woman, girl, or boy. And I want to simply say that you deserve to be heard, you deserve to be believed, you deserve to be supported, and you deserve to be protected. You may be feeling a mix of things, whether you've been in an abusive relationship or you know somebody who has been. You may be feeling anger and frustration that our world is still like this. You may be feeling sadness and even despair, wondering how we can change anything and feeling a sense of powerlessness. But I want to assure you that you are not powerless. And it's so important in times like this to not simply shut down and tune out what is going on in the public discourse. Yes, we may need to turn off our TVs and stop focusing on it for a while to regulate our nervous systems, but it's so important to tap into our courage to have a conversation about what is going on and about the systems and the cultural norms that allow abuse to continue to happen in our society. I want to start by talking about the concept of patriarchy and what it means. So, patriarchy is a set of social systems and cultural norms typically shaped around traditional male leadership. And they create unconscious and sometimes conscious bias towards women as well as power imbalances. You may be wondering, well, is this still a problem in this day and age? And I want to say absolutely it is. In addition to the numbers on violence that women experience, the UN also says that 70% of victims of human trafficking are women and girls. And women around the world still only have 69% of the legal rights of men. Meanwhile, sexual harassment continues to be a problem from our bedrooms to our boardrooms. And by sexual harassment, I mean any unwanted sexual behavior that causes harm or discomfort. That can include physical contact, like unwanted touch or sexual assault, but it can also include non-physical contact, like staring or leering at someone, like catcalling a woman on the street, or like sharing inappropriate photos online. It's important to understand that abuse is not confined to global scandals and powerful people. Abuse happens every day in our homes, in our schools, in our churches, in our locker rooms, and in our workplaces. And it's prolific because abuse grows in silence, and speaking up creates accountability. I grew up experiencing emotional abuse in my home, and the day to day criticism and bullying took a toll on my emotional health. I found it really hard to go home at the end of the school day, so I would go into every extracurricular activity imaginable just to avoid having to go home. And it wasn't just my abusers that I faced when I got home. It was the silence of the other family members who didn't stand up for me. I wished somebody had said, "I'm so sorry this is happening. I'm here for you," or "You don't deserve this," or even better yet, had the courage to stand up to the people who were abusing me. And that's why speaking up matters so much, because silence enables the abuser to continue doing what they're doing, and it makes the victim feel alone and powerless. So I want to talk directly to men for a moment and to explain that feminism isn't about hating men. It's simply the belief that everyone deserves to have equal rights and opportunities, regardless of their gender. And I hope that you believe in that too. We need good men to enter this conversation and to have our backs, whether we're in the room or not. This isn't about blaming you. It is about inviting you to help create a solution with us, because creating a safer world for women and children requires men to stand with us. When good men enter the room and speak up, cultures start to change. It's not enough to say, well, I don't abuse anybody, I'm a good guy. The role of a good man is to help to protect and stand up for our most vulnerable, including women and children. It's to hold other men accountable for their behavior. It's to model good behavior with what you're doing. And if any of your behavior happens to be disrespectful towards women or objectifying, that you take accountability and responsibility for changing that behavior. I'm going to include a link to a blog post below that'll provide some more ideas for what you can do to help make a safer world for women and children. Now I want to speak directly to women. We are not powerless. We can first of all do our own healing work so that we break the cycle of generational abuse and don't pass dysfunction on to future generations. We can also help other women who've been abused to leave and to heal. We can teach our girls to use their voices to say no and to set healthy boundaries. We can use our own voices to share our stories and to advocate for change. And we can also pray for peace and for healing around the world. When women speak up, even with shaky voices, change begins. So I want to share a story about how I used my own shaky voice. I was somewhere between the ages of 8 and 9. I was in grade 3. And I lived in a rural community, so we had a pretty long bus ride to school and back every day. The front half of the bus were younger kids in elementary school, and the back half of the bus was older children in junior high. So there's this one scrawny boy who used to get hauled to the back of the bus every day and would get beat up on by the other older kids. And I'd see this happening day in and day out and wonder why nobody was saying anything and nobody was doing anything. And I was just this tiny little girl. But one day I just couldn't take it any longer, and I marched to the back of the bus with knees shaking. And I said, "You have to stop doing this. This is hurting him." Then I ran back to my seat. Well, what happened after that was I got pummeled with oranges, apples, sandwiches, and even a compass thrown at me. So by the time I got home, I was covered in food. My mom obviously asked what happened, and I explained, and she marched into the principal's office and demanded that something be done. And because I had the courage to speak that day, the principal brought in that boy's parents, who put him in martial arts classes to learn how to defend himself. The bus driver was taught how to better handle kids like that on the bus, and those children were disciplined for their behavior. So yes, sometimes standing up and speaking out might not always get the positive reception we're hoping for, but what it does do is it advocates for the people who need us to have their back, and it does create change one step at a time. A little later on in my childhood, I became motivated to empower women. I remember sitting in my grade 6 class listening to my teacher, Mr. Leonard, talk about the inequalities between men and women and how women got paid far less for the exact same jobs as men. And I piped up and said, "Well, that's not fair." And he said, "It's true, it's not fair," but he said, "It's just the way things are." So I became determined to change how things are. Now, as a love and empowerment coach for women, I help women to heal after toxic relationships, to build their confidence, their boundaries, and their self-trust, and to choose healthier partners so they create secure, loving relationships. As a mom, I'm proud to say that I've raised a son who's not only respectful but uplifts women, and I've raised a daughter who has a strong voice and strong boundaries, and who's becoming a teacher so she can influence future generations. I believe that empowered women create better families, better relationships, better workplaces, and better societies. I also believe that we can create a better, safer world for everyone, but that requires accountability, that we hold perpetrators accountable for their behaviors, we bring them to justice, and we remove them from power. It requires a better justice system, one that advocates and supports victims of abuse. It requires education for our children as well as for adults on what equality means and what respect and consent means. And it requires better support and better protection and better healing for survivors of abuse. A safer world for women and children won't come from silence. It will come from the courage to speak up and say something, and from women and men standing together to create change. If this topic has resonated with you at all, I invite you to share it, to continue the conversation. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on what standing up for women and children looks like to you, and on what we can do to make this world a safer place for everyone. I'll provide some questions for conversation below. Respectful conversation is encouraged. Thank you so much for joining me today for this important conversation.